So with parts of the country still reeling from the aftermath of the devastating natural disaster in KwaZulu-Natal, climatologists have actually attributed the crisis to climate change. But the question is, how can we ensure that we're better prepared for future disasters? Let's bring in our guest on this, Tjeerd Driessen, I beg your pardon, who's the Climate Resistance Director at Royal HaskoningDHV, joins us via our video link. And it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for your time. I mean, you know, it's always difficult to try and map a way forward in a context where, for instance, what's taken place in KwaZulu-Natal was largely unpredicted. So in that world, how do we prepare for that? It appears you may have muted yourself. Do you want to just double check your setting? You're not. Okay, I'm doing some great lip reading at the moment. It might be an issue on our end. We'll try to get that sorted out and make sure that we can hold on to all of what you have to say. But of course, people saying that it's a variety of issues that contributed to the scale of the flooding that's taken place in KwaZulu-Natal. Certainly climate change up on that list of reasons. And it's not only here in KwaZulu-Natal that we've seen these adverse weather conditions. I mean, you don't have to think too far back when you consider what's taken place in countries like Mozambique, where there've been flooding because of torrential rains in quick succession. Interestingly enough, I think it was the Cape Argus reporting this morning that we're going to see patterns changing in the country, at least insofar as when we expect rainfall during the winter season. We know typically it is the Western Cape that enjoys much of its rain during winter. They're now being told to brace for a much drier season, at least for this year. It is the Eastern Cape that a lot of authorities are most worried about because of the predictions that come from the South African Weather Service. And already you can see the signs of that. I mean, we should be entering what is autumn and ultimately winter, but already flooding taking place in the Eastern Cape, prompting even President Cyril Ramaphosa to plan a visit to one of the hardest hit communities there to try ascertain ways through which he can assist them to respond. But these changing patterns certainly make it difficult for us to kind of find a way forward, at least insofar as being better prepared. Our guest is back again with us, and thanks very much indeed for your patience. And that's the question I posed to you. I mean, we can't really predict where we're headed next, and so how do we prepare for something like what we've seen take place in KwaZulu-Natal?
First of all, thanks for having me in the show. I think when it says when people say that we didn't see the storm coming, I think you know, warnings were given by South African Weather Service, and I think in that sense there might also be an issue in how early warnings of flooding are communicated to the man on the street, right? So are all people receiving the right warnings to respond to an emerging flood? At the same time, it also means that you know, we need to think larger than just early warnings, but also how can we upgrade the system in a way that it is capable to deal with these kind of floods. We have the right maintenance of our existing infrastructure. Do we have drainage systems in place, also in places like informal settlements? And are we dealing with the correct urban planning?
Yeah, and I guess it shouldn't be lost to us that there are still people, even within the scientific community, who are pushing back against the notion of climate change. I mean, is it, do you reckon, an unequivocal conclusion, a far-gone conclusion, I should say, that what we're seeing take place in this country is a result of something like that, of that phenomenon?
Yeah, scientifically, you can't really say that this event is typically attributed to climate change. Because climate change is a long-term trend, while this is just one event that happened last week. What we can say is that these type of events will happen more often, more frequent, and also the intensity will increase. So what we saw now in Durban is not really that strange. I mean, last year we also saw a typical extreme event in Georgia, and my expectation is to be more often.
And apologies to our viewers, it doesn't seem we have the best connection to our guests, but hopefully the connection will hold through. You've spoken about there being a need for more than just early warning signs, but I imagine even those signs, if they are gotten right, you need to somehow get to a point where residents are sensitized to being able to move quickly when those signs are actually given. You know, for instance, in KZN, you've mentioned that this is not new. In fact, as far as you're concerned, it's not out of the ordinary. But that didn't stop people from almost shrugging off the warnings that there's, you know, going to be a whole lot more rain than what is expected. So how do we sort out that issue? More sentiment and cultural perceptions, for lack of a better term.
Is that the awareness also among the community is increased when it comes to flood. That means that, for example, using flood risk assessments, one can understand what is the flood risk that a certain neighborhood, street, or even building is experiencing, and that might also be a wake-up to settle in some places or not. At the same time, early warnings that are currently given are quite at a high level. So like part of Durban might experience flash floods. While currently there are also technologies that we can actually pinpoint on a location level where early warnings or where flooding will actually occur. So if we make those early warnings also more location specific, it will also help people respond in a better way.
Tjeerd Driessen, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Apologies for our connection to you. Hopefully we'll be able to pick up this conversation at another stage, but certainly the thrust of what you had to say coming through loud and clear. Tjeerd is part of the climate resistance, or at least he's the climate resistance director at the Royal HaskoningDHV.